Welcome to our YouTube channel.
Hey, everyone.
We're kicking off this deep dive today, and we're really going to plunge into some specific sources you've shared with us.
That's right.
This is all about trading psychology, and specifically looking at that deep connection between what's going on inside you, your feelings, self-worth, confidence, maybe failure, and what happens out there in the markets when you're actually trading.
Yeah, how those internal states affect the external results and vice versa.
Exactly. So our mission really is to unpack what these sources suggest is really at play when trading results start to feel incredibly personal.
Personal is the key word there.
Definitely. So let's dive in.
Right. So the sources, they paint a pretty clear picture of the kinds of feelings that can bubble up. Like, think about hitting a series of stop losses. Maybe 4 in a row, right? And maybe you even executed your strategy perfectly each time.
Right. Followed the plan to the letter.
Exactly. But instead of just seeing it as, statistics playing out, you might feel this intense wave of disappointment, or even like a profound sense of personal failure.
Oh, absolutely. Or another scenario they mention. Maybe you make a couple of trades you later look back on and think, wow, those were foolish mistakes, within just one trading week.
We've all been there.
And it's not just the frustration about losing money, is it? It feels like a deeper hit to your sense of self.
Yeah.
Suddenly you might feel completely unworthy or incompetent, like you're just fundamentally incapable of trading successfully.
It really feels like that trade, that loss, is saying something deeply negative about you as a person.
Yes, exactly that.
And this is where the sources offer a really fascinating perspective, I think.
Okay.
They suggest these powerful feelings, often quite painful ones. They aren't primarily just a reaction to the trading result itself.
Oh, so what else is going on?
Well, they trace these reactions back, way back sometimes, back to how your mind might have been sort of defined or programmed much earlier in life.
Programmed by what?
By your environment, basically.
Yeah.
Perhaps growing up consciously or, maybe unconsciously you were labeled or perhaps just made to feel like a failure. Or maybe inherently incompetent or incapable.
Wow. Okay. So those early experiences, they kind of created a blueprint, like a definition in your mind about who you are, and now you're applying that same blueprint to your trading results.
That's the link they're making, yeah. It's a powerful one.
It really is.
And here's the crucial bit. It's often challenging, but the sources really emphasize this, those early definitions. Being programmed to feel like a failure or incapable.
Yeah.
They are asserted quite strongly to be not true. They're not accurate representations of your actual worth or your capability.
So just echoes.
They're presented more as like products, just the result of maybe an unhealthy environment you were in during those really formative years. It's a key distinction they draw. Environmental impact versus your inherent self.
That distinction feels incredibly important. So it's saying the feeling of being a failure isn't actual proof you are a failure.
Right.
It's potentially just old programming being triggered by the stress of a loss.
That's the idea presented, yes.
Okay. But if that's the case, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard for people to really feel that truth? Especially, when things go wrong in trading, it feels so real in the moment.
Oh, absolutely. That's the core of the psychological challenge these sources are trying to address. That old programming, it runs deep. It feels automatic. However, the sources then contrast this reaction. They look at someone who operates from a different place internally, someone with a stronger sense of internal worth, someone who feels valuable and capable, at their core.
Okay, so how do they handle those same trading setbacks?
Yeah.
Mistakes, the consecutive losses?
Well, based on what the sources describe, their reaction is fundamentally different.
How so?
When they make a mistake, their focus shifts pretty quickly. It moves away from self-blame, from beating themselves up, towards forgiveness and, crucially, learning. What can I take from this? They aren't paralyzed by shame.
Okay, that makes sense. And the losing streaks, like those 4 losses in a row, even if they followed the plan.
Yeah, even 4 or, the sources mention, even 8 in a row, if they followed their plan. They don't internalize them as personal failures.
They don't take it personally.
Exactly. So instead of feeling discouraged and maybe throwing their whole strategy out the window.
Which is tempting.
So tempting. But they stick to their plan.
Yeah.
They understand, or rather, they operate from the understanding that losses are just part of the probabilistic process of trading.
Right. It's baked into the system.
It is. And the sources even note, kind of interestingly, that they might actually encourage themselves for sticking to the setup, despite the negative outcome.
Huh. Like, good job following the rules, even though it lost money this time.
Precisely. That internal feeling of worthiness, that foundation, it provides a kind of buffer. It allows them to separate the trade result from their identity, from their self-worth.
Okay, so let's bring this back to you, the listener, for a moment. What this deep dive into your sources seems to be highlighting is this really strong possibility that those gut-wrenching feelings you might experience after trading setbacks, they aren't necessarily accurate reflections of your skill or your value as a person. They could be echoes of old programming from your past.
And just recognizing that potential link,
Yeah.
that's powerful. It allows you to maybe begin the process of untangling your self-worth from your day-to-day or week-to-week trading performance.
Yeah, it sort of reframes the whole experience.
It empowers you, potentially, to view a losing trade not as proof that you're inadequate,
Right.
but simply as an outcome within a probabilistic system, which, might be triggering an old and, importantly, untrue definition of yourself.
Understanding that connection, that those intense feelings might be tied to definitions that the sources suggest aren't even true about who you really are. That really opens up a new perspective on the whole trading psychology journey, doesn't it?
It really does. What this fundamentally suggests, I think, is that mastering trading psychology might involve looking deeper than just, managing emotions in the heat of the moment.
Deeper how?
Well, potentially requiring an exploration and maybe even a revision of these really foundational internal definitions about yourself, about your worth, your capability.
Okay. Which naturally raises a key question, drawing directly from what these sources are saying. If past environments, maybe years ago, created these definitions about you that the sources claim aren't actually true, then what might be the very first step? The first step in learning to recognize and maybe challenge those patterns when they flare up during your trading day?
That's a big question, and a really significant one to consider based on this material.
Definitely something to mull over.
Indeed.
On this channel, we talk about the key points of trading psychology. If you'd like, come along with us on this journey.